This is E3 Digital, a curatorial practice documenting the artists, artifacts, and ideas inscribed on Bitcoin. Today, I'm joined by Donny, artist, collector, and one of the more thoughtful voices in the Ordinal ecosystem. We'll talk about identity, collecting, conceptual art, protocol native creativity, and what culture on Bitcoin might actually become. Welcome, Donnie, to E3 Digital.
Howdy. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thank you for taking the time to do this with me. I know that you're very busy, and I want to jump right into it. We were talking a little bit before I brought you on, and it seemed unfair because I could already tell this was going to be a great conversation. And so you describe yourself, quote, "I make stuff and I want to show you." That's refreshingly simple, but behind that simplicity, there's clearly a deeper conceptual framework. For people just meeting you, who is Donnie?
I guess the best answer I can give to that is I don't know. And I think life, and I'm just making this up as I go because I don't have a really good answer for this. Life is probably just the process of trying to get to know ourselves and our surroundings. So I really can't tell you who I am. In fact, I say this a lot when people say that they're like, they are X or Y. It's easy to say when you have a job. You're like, I'm a bartender, or I'm a blacksmith, or something like that. But that's still, it's oversimplified. And I think whatever we are is whatever everyone else decides we are, because it almost feels unfair for me to say what I am. But I'm a guy who, let me see, how can I make this short? I hit my head on the ground when I was really young and I can't form memories properly. So now I just like, as I go, every day I wake up, I'm like, who am I going to be today? And often for stretches of like a decade, that's one singular obsessive focus. And sometimes it changes from day to day. And I guess my answer is I'm present. And I say that because since I can't form memories, I can't really bring damage with me. So I'm always just like wherever I am, like that's what I'm doing right now. I'm not thinking about breakfast or lunch or anything else. I'm just here talking with you. So whoever I am, I'm present, I guess.
In 2026, remaining present seems to be an extremely more and more difficult task, whether it be through distractions of technology, and identities that the world wants to try to create for you. One question that I had, as I've gotten to explore your identity or lack thereof, or multiple identities, maybe, I can't figure out if you're an artist or a collector. And which is it?
Can't it be both, I guess. Being a person who, yeah, I guess it's both. I refuse to call myself an artist because I feel like that's something other people have to say about you. It's like saying you're handsome or something. Like it requires third party verification, I think, for it to mean much. And maybe same for collector too, because you can be, I guess, definitionally, if you just like some stuff and you happen to aggregate it, then it kind of just makes you a collector of whatever. Um, I would say I'm both, though. I've always appreciated art, specifically digital art spoke to me even in the 2000s, like the mid 2000s on. I wasn't aware of it in the 90s because I was like, 10, 11, 15, whatever. But into the 2000s, once I became an adult who was like working in public and paying rent and doing stuff with friends, there were a lot of my friends who were engaged in street art and like projection mapping and all kinds of things that you could consider digital art that is not ownable on a blockchain. So I just never even acknowledged it until the blockchain era came around, and I sort of like I fell in love with the idea of being able to like trace and track and quickly trade and decide like they're just it was like when the telephone was invented. All of a sudden, you could talk to people on the other side of the planet. Where before, everything I was doing was just in Buffalo, New York. I would show up to art openings or galleries or museums or whatever, and that was all I could do really, unless I wanted to travel to New York City or something, or Rochester or wherever, Toronto. But now you could just open Discord, and you can see on at that time when I was getting into it, it was Solana specifically that was like the NFT world that I got into. And something that was really attractive to me about it was that you could like own it. And I struggle with this a lot. Wait, what's the question? Was I'm an artist or a collector? I'm both. This is the long story. I'm both because I've always appreciated it. And I was a classical pianist for 10 years. I was in bands. I co-owned a recording studio, kind of. I was like a operational owner of it in a way, for years. And I played in a band for a while and was always into like some sort of physical medium something. I have difficulty drawing the lines between those things. So the short
Mm.
version of that answer is both and forever. It was never like there was no transition. I just like I do more of it now than I did before, I think. That is a good answer. I kind of lost the question there somewhere.
No,
I can go, and I don't know if I went in the right direction.
and feel free to go. But yes, that you answered the question. Um, you're I a follow on to that though is you talked about projection mapping, and then you also kind of mentioned a couple of cities that all seem to be northeasternly located. I know you currently live in Puerto Rico. Tell us about your journey from sort of birth and then maybe to Puerto Rico. What brought you there? I kind of already got clued in a little bit off camera, but
Yeah,
maybe
and then I stopped myself because I didn't want to give up the juice.
yeah, but also maybe sort of your path into Web3, which you also kind of just touched on there.
Yeah, totally. I was born in Buffalo, New York, in the house that my parents still live in. I can still go stand where I came out of my mother, which I think is a really unique. I don't know exactly how that's like guided my life, but I think it's a really unique sense of stability that I have, having the same parents in the same house in the same city for eons. And I, from the age of 3, was playing piano, like not professionally, obviously, because I was 3, but I was taking piano lessons and practicing an hour a day, for 15 years, probably close to it. And I was always competitive in single person sports like swimming. I guess a relay in swimming is more of a team sport, but it kind of wasn't. Like it's just I've always been in like very single competitive positions for some reason. I don't really know why that is. And and then high school, whatever. Everybody's a high schooler. You do stupid stuff when you're a kid, and then you eventually do less of it as an adult. One of those stupid things was I was snowboarding when I was 16. I think this was in 2001, I guess, and I smashed my face on the ground at like 70 miles an hour or something. And I shattered the goggles between my face and the ground. And I woke up not knowing who I was or where I was, and not recognizing my own face in the mirror. And nothing ever came back. I still don't know what I look like. I don't know what my girlfriend looks like. I don't know what my mother looks like. I don't recognize, I can't fathom what a room looks like or what the couch looks like behind me until I look at it and I immediately recognize it. It's a very strange way to live. But that I think deterred what I was probably ultimately going to do, which would be more like I started mechanical engineering in college, and then I realized it was way too prescribed, and uncovering things that already exist and that everybody else already knows about is like it just feels like regurgitative to me and not explorative. So I ended up in philosophy, getting a philosophy BA with like an almost minor in astronomy because I find the universe really fascinating. I think I would have been like a mall pianist or a concert pianist or in a band or something, or an engineer had I not hit my head on the ground. But when I did that, I could no longer do, I couldn't play piano anymore. Like I went from concert competitive pianist to dude who can't play the piano. So like, where do you go from that? Especially when you don't know that you're missing something because you don't know you ever had it really. So I just kind of like felt around in the dark for a lot of years, and I ended up in the restaurant industry, starting at like sports bars and then a Subway. I managed at a Subway for a bunch of years, and ended up bar backing and then bartending and then bar managing and moving from Buffalo to Rochester to Brooklyn, New York, back to Rochester, and then briefly to Buffalo before ending up in Puerto Rico. And all of that was me deciding every year to still be in the restaurant industry because I still found creative problems to solve. I find the restaurant industry is one of the most riveting fields to work in because you can do everything from cleaning the toilets and scooping ice into the ice wells for the busy bartenders when you're like 16 or 19 years old, all the way up to building interoperable spreadsheet systems for a multi-restaurant group and managing cost in the background, like not even being in the foreground at all. And I think I traversed pretty much all of that. And by the end of it, I realized that most of the people I was working with were, because the restaurant industry is notoriously high turnover. Everybody has worked in the restaurant industry, not everybody, but like a huge portion of the population has. But most of them not for more than like a year, 5 years, kind of like tops is where it sits. So when you're in it for 25 years, you're just like, it's like Groundhog Day. You continue to hire and fire and work with the same people because the ones that grow leave, and then the new ones who haven't learned anything yet, and they have to learn all of the new lessons under your, supervision or whatever. It just got exhausting and it felt kind of thankless. And I didn't join the restaurant industry to like, I did join it to be creative and solve problems and explore territory and like grow as a person and help a community and all that stuff. I did not get into it to prove that I know what I'm talking about to someone who just started working in the restaurant industry. When I say something simple like, I don't know, can you like sweep the floor over there? It looks a little dirty. Service is about to start, and then get pushed back. Like every year from a new person, there'd be like a new person waiting on deck to like give me grief about something. And it just like, it got me to the point where I needed to get out. And I think this is a really good thing because when I decided to put that down, it was slowly, it was over the course of like 3 years where I just sort of like got further and further out from behind the bar. I didn't realize how much of my life, because I was working like 12 to 17 hours a day, 6 days a week. I didn't realize how much of my life I was just kind of like fast forwarding through by doing that at some point anyway, when all the progress was done and like the creative side of me was no longer put to good use there, it just was like evaporating time to some degree. And now that I don't do that, I have so much time to like explore everything that I've been thinking about for years and just never put the time into. So that's how I ended up here. I was working remotely finally, or not working at all. And I just decided to move somewhere warm because Buffalo's super cold, like really cold.
Well, I have to imagine that that time you spent in the industry, you would have met so many different cast of characters, and probably got to understand life in a way that many people won't. But it struck me when I first asked you who you are as the first question, and you said, every day I'm figuring out who I'm going to be, and you sort of, I guess, preluded to what I now understand is a real story about you. And I want to go deeper with it just because I find it really interesting. So I guess how, after you hitting your head, how does life work for you now? Is it almost like 50 first dates? And I'm not saying that to be funny. Like I'm saying that
No,
as to
it
like,
is kind of funny.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good. But that was not my intention. But how does it work for you? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It makes perfect sense. I've actually spent a lot of time trying to figure this out because when this happened to me, doctors didn't know that it happened to me because neuroscience in the early 2000s was like archaic. Nobody could figure anything out. Functional MRIs didn't really exist, and the methods of brain scanning and the understanding of each person's brain was like this compared to now. So I've spent a lot of my time trying to figure out why I feel differently than everybody else, and I think I've nailed it down to there are a few main impacts of this. Maybe this will help provide some clarity. I hate holidays. I know hate's a really strong word, but I guess I feel alienated by holidays because they're absurd and not logical. But that works for most people's brains because if something, are really tradition-based creatures. So if something has been happening for years or you grew up with it happening, you begin to associate good things and family gatherings as like this thing that it doesn't matter that it's like a made up character and you're putting all the lights outside and you're killing a tree and bringing it inside and all this like crazy stuff we do. What matters is that you get the family together. But we put these weird markers all over it that just seems absurd to me. And I can't bring myself to care because I don't have that association because I can't remember it. So it's been really alienating every series of holidays, having to re-explain to someone that like, I don't know what it's like someone walking up to you in the middle of Times Square and saying like, are you here for the My Little Pony convention? And you're like, why does everybody keep asking me this? I don't care. I didn't even know this is happening. I don't care about My Little Pony. So the lack of the ability to remember the things that everyone else takes for granted because
Mm.
I don't feel as though I've personally experienced them is really alienating. Also, if my mom and I, or my girlfriend and I, or anybody and I get into a disagreement or an argument, it feels as though that's the only thing that has ever happened because I don't have the context of previously remembering good experiences. So while the good is really good, and every time I experience something good, it's like my first time experiencing something good. That also is the case with a lot of bad stuff. And I've had to temper my responses to things because it's really easy for me to go off the deep end and get sucked into a something that is bad that's happening right now as if it's the only thing that will ever happen again in my life because it feels that way. So that's
That
been a little bit difficult to live with. Yeah.
no, I was gonna keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, there's only one more. There's one more that I think will provide a lot of clarity. When I say I can't recognize myself or my girlfriend or my mother, it's because I can't form declarative long-term memories. I can still form procedural long-term memories. So the declarative ones are like when I ask you what you had for breakfast today, like maybe you can envision it. Like you can see the eggs, you can smell the bacon, like you can re-experience it. Mine's blank. As soon as I'm done eating, I don't remember having done any of it. I can't envision it. I don't know what it is. But procedural memories are like, when you approach a stairway that you've never walked before, you're not like, what is this thing? You know what it is because you have this functional form of like stairway. You know what stairs are. You know how to walk up them to the point where you don't have to think about doing it really. And quite the same with, say, a door that you've never approached before, say to a friend's house maybe. When you walk up to the door, not only do you know that it's a door from far away, you know how to get to it, but when you get to it, you know exactly how to open it. Like you don't have to work out what to do with a door. It's procedural memory. You don't even know you're doing it. So I still have all that stuff, but my life still works fine. I know what a chair is and how to sit in it, and I know that where the bed is and how to sleep in it. I just like if you ask me what my girlfriend looks like, I can give you data points about it, but I can't envision her, which was a big part of the impetus for the first set of drawings that I put on Bitcoin. At that point, it wasn't really relevant that they were on Bitcoin. But it was an exploration into forms and like what my brain thinks of when it thinks of an item. Like I know what a light switch is. Can I draw one at all? Like, can I even fabricate what that? How did the little, there's the plug and there's like the ground pole and then the two fins on a plug that you plug into the wall. Like you can
Yes,
envision it. I
I'm
can't.
looking at
I
one.
just
That's the
like
only reason.
yeah, I
But
just
yes,
glanced at one. That's the only reason I knew what it was too. But like everybody knows what those are, and I just thought to myself, can I draw that? Like, what happens when I try to draw something from memory? What does it end up looking like? And there's another series of stories to that, but I'll wait for the rat. Something we
that
should bring up.
that um, is going to make some of my future questions that I had pre-planned so much more interesting to dive into.
Serendipity.
But I think the analogy of the holidays and how you explain that made it make a lot of sense. And declarative versus procedural memories, that also made a lot of sense as well. And so, thank you for sharing that and being willing to share that, being vulnerable here in that sense. But I want to now sort of start moving to. Well, I thought that Modal was your first collection, but before I get into Modal, you mentioned some of the first things you put on Bitcoin. What do you remember? What the
Yeah.
first thing you inscribed on Bitcoin was?
Yeah, actually, the first thing I inscribed was a GIF of a woman twerking with giant googly eyes on her butt, but it was like that's not a creative endeavor of mine. It was just like early protocol stuff. Like I was
Yes.
like, how does this thing work? And what if this evaporates from the internet? We don't want it to because it's one of the funniest parts of the internet. So anyway, it was not anything of mine. The next thing I did was a product of I was working in a restaurant in Rochester, New York, with an ex-girlfriend of mine. She was like the manager of the joint, and I was like the other manager of the joint or whatever. And sometimes before the shift, when everybody's got all the silverware polished and all the tables are set and all the juices are squeezed or whatever, there's like a dead zone sometimes of 5 or 10 minutes where everybody's ready to work, but no one's there yet. So sometimes we would do fun creative exercises. And the exercise that day was that everyone had to draw themselves if they were a rat. I don't remember how it came up in conversation, but like everybody on staff, and there were probably like 20 people, everybody had to draw with a pen on a napkin what they would look like if they were a rat, or what a rat would look like if it had their characteristics. And some of the rats were like mega strong men, some were like video game karate rats, some were like fairy princess rats, but they all had character. And the one I drew just looked like no rat and every rat. And this was sort of the beginning of me trying to figure out what is different about my brain from a creative standpoint, or from like a recall standpoint, maybe a generation standpoint. Um, my rat just looked like, it didn't even look like a sewer rat. It was just like a black line rat. It was recognizable as a rat, but it was undifferentiable from any other anything that's ever happened. Sort of like a platonic form of a rat. It had no characteristics except those very specific ones necessary to be recognized as a rat. It didn't even have like an expression. It didn't have feelings. It was just like a rat, you know. Um, it's really difficult to describe that when, if you see it, if you look at the, actually, if you go to logicmodal.xyz, not that anyone will see this, um, because I don't know if you can screen share, but if you go to logicmodal.xyz, there's like a drop down menu on the top left, and it starts at the modal page, but there's two other collections that are in a drop down menu, and reforms is one of them. And the first reform is the rat, and that's the rat that I drew on the napkin. Um, so that collection was born of this like exploration into what happens when I try to draw a concept. Does it come out blank? Because it kind of does.
Uh, Now that you say that, I do recall, and but now I'm going to have to go look again more closely after this is done. There probably is a way to share the
That was the
screen.
first inscription.
Yeah. Okay.
No, it
And
doesn't. You know, it's not necessary.
yeah, I'm about to say I don't want to try for the first time, but I will definitely learn how to do that. Uh,
Yeah, no
I,
biggie.
I want to talk about identity and pseudonymity. Online, you have a pseudonym. You're, I guess, kind of a pseudonymous account, while also making work that explicitly explores identity and consciousness. How do you think about identity in internet native creative spaces?
This is a really fun time. Identity is one of the things that got me into crypto before art did. I was really into DeFi and decentralized identity because the idea of the disconnect between our physical reality and our new digital reality is it's a problem that plagues, I think, like everything that ever tries to launch on the internet, because like you can't put a banana online. You either have a physical banana or you have a digital banana, and when you move one, the other one kind of can't move with it because it doesn't know it's there. They're like mandatorily separate spaces. Um, and we've been just desperately trying to connect them for a really long time. So you're talking about the modal Twitter account, right? And that the modal pseudonym is what produced this like identity exploration of sentience, kind of, right?
Yes, correct.
So I did that because in the ordinals space for the last 2 years, the tides have been insanely low and people's morale has been low. And I didn't feel comfortable sharing things that I was making as me, because I didn't want for it to be viewed through the lens of what people thought I was, which was like a technical, an interested person in the technicalities of the Ordinals protocol and the Bitcoin network itself. It felt like an inconsistency that the general vibe just wouldn't have handled well. And I'm not one to control narratives. I don't like doing that stuff, but I figured if I do all this work, if I start this, because I was making that series for like, I don't know, 6 or 7 months probably, just straight all the time in all my free time. And I was inscribing it as I went, and I was tweeting about it as I went on. And I was like, I don't think that most of the people who follow me, like the Donny account, would care about this. So I'm going to make a new account for people to gravitate towards if they do happen to care about this stuff. But one of my biggest nightmares is having people care about this just because I'm me, because they like me, and then they support the art because it's me. I don't really want that. I wanted people to either connect with it or not, and to be honest with themselves about whether or not they wanted to like partake in it. And I think we successfully achieved that by briefly having it be pseudonymous, and then opening it up and saying, okay, this is, I've been doing this. I don't think it's like misleading in any way. It just felt appropriate at one time when like the vibes, like my friends weren't just freaking out all day every day and yelling about money or being mad at each other about nothing, things that didn't really happen. Like it just didn't feel like a welcoming environment for a creative endeavor. So I just wanted to put it somewhere that no one would see it unless they really tried to find it. Um, so that's a starting point on identity. I have probably a lot more things to say about it, but that's probably a relevant answer, right?
Yes, no, that makes a lot of sense. I want to kind of head more in the direction where we've already kind of gone down and talk about now. You'll have to, and one, correct me. I have been pronouncing it modal, and so am I
Yep.
pronouncing it correctly? Okay.
Yeah, modal. It's named after modal logic, and modal logic instead of classical logic is like what is and what isn't in like philosophy, and modal logic brings in the concept of necessity and possibility, which I think is where human life lives, and that was why I named that collection that.
So it's not just a pixel art movement. It seems as though there's a whole conceptual framework moving from atoms to sentience to singularity. Where did these ideas come from? Philosophical, personal, aesthetic. Where did they come from for you?
Kind of all of those things. Nothing happens in a vacuum, so I think anything that happens probably happens as a product of like everything you just mentioned. Um, the motivation to explore this was more to digest my own feelings about the trajectory of where short form content has put us and where social media and the internet have put us. Because I remember growing up as a kid with just a phone, like we used to have phones on the wall. Remember, I don't know how old you are, but like the phone was attached to the wall. You could barely move with it. So we went from this like you can't communicate with people without going outside to a world where you don't want to communicate with people outside or inside and you just want to stare at a phone, right? So I kept on mulling over the I guess implications of this, and I came to maybe a conclusion, I guess, or at least like a path that modal expresses, that the gradients represent atoms. There's like, let's say there's a universe and it's brand new and it's just atoms. It's just individual elements. In the second series in that, because it's 9 subseries in the modal series, and they're like all of sequentially cut in half in size. So the first gradient series is 256 pieces, cohesion is 128, identity is 64, and so on and so forth. Gradient represents atoms, and cohesion represents elements. So like, or no, molecules rather. So like we move from the bare bones into these like structures, kind of. The structures then allow sentient life to emerge in the universe. So we have like, atoms to molecules to sentience, and then to like organization of sentience and expansion and narratives and propaganda, and then into mandatory interdependence, where like you can't make a chair. It's like everything I'm using right now, I can't make. It's a product of something that's completely interdependent, and it's opt-outable, but all of us choose not to opt out of it because the fruits of that, despite being kind of like unempowering, are empowering, because I can't have a computer monitor if I try to make one. It would take me 600 years to make this computer monitor that I'm sitting in front of. So it details like the walk from dead, lifeless atoms through sentience in our journey into what I would describe as, I guess, singularity, where monoculture kind of becomes the norm, where everyone knows what everyone's thinking at all points in time, and no one really has a new thought because it's too well communicated from person to person. So I've just been like, being 41, I watched the world go from interacting only in person to never ever interacting in person, and it felt like someone slammed on the brakes in a car and I didn't have a seatbelt on. It's kind of like I have like whiplash from it. So I wanted to take some time to dive into that, and I wanted to tie in other pieces of my like my lack of the ability to understand what I've seen in the current moment, like to pull, say, breakfast, for example. I don't remember what for breakfast. I'm pretty sure it was, eggs or whatever. But I don't remember that. It's like, how does that translate into when I open up a palette? What colors do I choose? Do I have preferences? Do I need someone to tell me what my preferences are? Do I work better under those circumstances? Because life in the universe feels like it was kind of prescribed, like it couldn't have happened any other way than it did. It was just like a mandatory accident. So I set myself up with these generative gradients. There's 256 of them, and each one of those I picked 4. They're all the same distance from the corners, but 2 pixels in and 2 pixels down from each corner. Those are 4 colors in a rectangle. Those 4 hex codes were used to make one of the following pieces. So of all of the 256, well, 255 of the gradients, the palettes from each one of those are actually used and only used to make one of the following pieces in the series. It's difficult to describe what that connection is, but I wanted to make sure that I was like corralled into using a very limited set of colors and a limited ability to create new colors from those colors, um, such that I would take that set of variables out of me trying to figure this out. It's kind of like if you want to learn about wine, you control one of the variables. You say, I am only in this tasting, we're drinking all Pinot Noir from Oregon, right? So that's the variable that you're controlling. And now you want to taste like from 4 different plots and from 6 different years or something like that. You can learn a lot more about wine when you control one of the variables. I was controlling for color in this one because I'm really not sure what my relationship to color is. And I wanted to help myself explore that without all of the like paralyzing burden of choosing something that is maybe regrettable in the future because like I don't always feel like that color represents the thing I was trying to represent. So it's a color study and exercise in extreme minimalism in a lot of cases. But I think most of all, it's an exploration into sentience and like the path that humans, everything that had to happen for humans to end up where they are today, like right now.
Do you have this is not a planned question, but do you have a favorite philosopher or maybe some philosophers that have impacted you more than others?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. And I'm probably going to mess up some of their names, but I remember, I think it was John Locke, who was famous for utilitarianism specifically. I really dig the concept of utilitarianism. I think it's a beautiful way of traversing the world. But I, most of all, I think every philosopher I learned about added something to my eventual taste or like default setting, which I think is referred to technically as easiness. So maybe determinism is a better way to put this, or a better philosophical concept to pick, because easiness is the character trait. I mean, this is not the strict definition, I'm sure, is the character trait of realizing that some bad things just have to happen. And the fact that we individually think they're bad, maybe other things don't think they're bad, and that everything fits into a larger context. So I think it's taken a lot of anxiety off of me. Like I don't have to watch the news and like feel like I have to control wars and stuff because I can't do anything about it. Like, what am I going to do about a war, right? I think a lot of people have this like inherent sense of responsibility that fixing the world's problems is their problem. When in fact most people can't do anything about most of the things they're seeing online because most of the or on the news or whatever, because those things are not only out of their control but they're out of their geographic area entirely.
Mm.
Like most of the stuff we watch on the news is not, we wouldn't even be able to confirm that it actually happened. Like it's so far away from us and it's something we'd never see in real life for the most part, yet we obsess over it and it's like constantly regurgitated on news outlets, and then our whole lives are dictated by this stuff that we can't confirm ever happened, that we somehow feel an anxiety to help like impact or control. And I think determinism, or the concept of determinism, just kind of led me to realizing that I can only do as much as I can do wherever I am, and that's all I can really be held as responsible for internally. That is, anybody can place expectations on me from the outside and that's on them. But all I can really do is try to be nice to people around me, try to help those that I see in need, and not stare at the TV and worry about bombs somewhere because I'm not Superman, dude. I can't do it. So determinism and easiness, I think, is the answer.
I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask, why was
Okay.
pixel art specifically the right language for this project?
That's a really good question. I tried to dabble in code-based generative art a few years ago, and it just never felt like a native language. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I felt I really like a lot of the long and short form generative art that's come out of the last 5 or 10 years, but it's not my language. And I realized that when I started messing around in pixel art because I wanted to start from the very bottom where there are fewer options, fewer choices. Maybe not so much that. Trying to communicate a thought with as few things as possible. It's as few pixels, as few colors, as few whatevers, or as small data as possible. So there's a lot of reasons for pixel art. One of my favorite reasons, though, is that pixel art was an accident that happened in the 80s because computers couldn't. I mean, everything is pixel art unless it's an SVG. All art that you see that is pixelated is pixel art technically. The thing we call pixel art that we became familiar with in the 80s was just like a decade where computers couldn't do enough to mimic real life in an anything other than very abstract way. So I think pixel art was not explored as much as it could have been and still hasn't been because we only stopped at it accidentally and briefly and then we all moved on. And most of what people think of when they think of pixel art is whatever they grew up playing, like 80s video games, like, I don't know, Contra or 1942 or like Mario Brothers or something like that. And those are all like, I know we don't think of them this way, but those are all abstract representations of things we now find familiar. Because it's, and I don't know what this boundary is, but until you reach a certain pixel depth, you can't do reality. That's why AI is generally speaking not great at pixel art because it can't think or couldn't, a year ago. I don't know what it can do today. It can't think abstractly. So it can't make something that reminds you of a face. It can only make a face or pixelate a real picture of a face. But operating in that abstract space really interests me. And I think going back from, I mean, we were already in 4K, 8K. We're making art that is more realistic than real life at the moment. But we blazed past minimalism in terms of like pixel art, that is. And I think it deserves a little more time. So I'm still not done messing around in that, that very mandatorily 2D space and trying to see what we can do with it.
Earlier in the interview, you were talking about sort of your time growing up in the mid '90s, and you described your interactions with digital spaces. Um, do you do you think that sort of internet native mediums, as I mean, I consider pixel art to be an internet native medium, but do you think internet native mediums in general have been overlooked or have sort of maybe been sped past, or how do you think of that?
This we almost started to talk about this right before the show, and I was like, just leave it for this. I think we speed past everything because we don't know its context at the time. We don't understand why something is important until well after it's happened. I think that's proven itself time and time again. Um, a lot of people on Twitter are howling about why nobody takes digital art seriously or why the traditional art world doesn't take digital art seriously. They also don't take anything that was digitally made and physically reproduced. Not anything, but like mostly anything through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s before blockchain existed, when digital art was blossoming, I guess. None of that is really taken particularly seriously either. And I still think it's because it's not far enough in the rearview mirror where the context hasn't it just hasn't gotten far away enough yet for everyone to get a really full picture of what's going on. It's like when if you get a plate, you order a plate at dinner and you say you get like chicken, rice, and beans, and someone's like, "What's the best part of that?" You're like, "I don't know, I haven't eaten it yet." And like you don't know if the chicken, the rice, or the beans was the best part of the meal until you're done with the plate. And I think that's where we're at with digital art still. We don't have enough surrounding context. We haven't gone through enough to see it from the right angle.
That I I feel similarly, and I think that that is the conversation we were about to get into, and
Yeah.
it would kind of take a divergent from my pre-planned questions, but it just feels so natural with you. Um,
Sure.
Recently, I had stumbled across something on Twitter, and I'm constantly on Twitter, so I can't remember specifically, but I remember it was someone's project, and it was, I don't remember if it was a reimagination or if it was sort of maybe just someone just kind of bringing about what was the old, I think kind of in like Windows 98, maybe in like Windows XP, your background, like when you'd log in,
Yeah.
there'd be all these creative backgrounds you could choose. And someone was just highlighting like, if you look at the detail that was involved in these things, it's actually very beautiful. And I have been talking with my wife a lot about artistic mediums recently, and she's more of a painter. And I in collecting ordinals, I like a lot of the Microsoft Paint Studio artworks,
Yeah.
and because I think personally, I feel like, one, I remember messing around on Microsoft Paint whenever I'm 32. I turned 33 in a couple of months. But
Congrats.
it seems like, thank you. It seems like this sort of this time where I remember fiddling and doodling with it, and it actually does take tremendous skill to be able to do that to a degree where I look at something and I resonate with it. Do you have any thoughts about that? About all that? Do you have any
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah. I think it's not abnormal for people who grew up around stuff to like when that stuff is kind of like replicated, or when they see things that remind them of it. I think great examples of this are, I don't know, Nirvana being cool again, or like pop punk. Like if you grew up around a bunch of kids who are like emo and they listen to pop punk, later on in life, if you go to one of their weddings, they're probably gonna, even if they don't listen to pop punk anymore, everybody knows the same song. It's like a cultural remnant of an early tribe that then later, when that tribe meets up again, they're like, you guys remember this was our tribe song or our tribe dance or our tribe art or whatever. So I think everybody who was in school in the 90s and was like faced with computers in school or had a home computer, the thing that was on all those computers was MS Paint, and everything was like made in or around that. So I don't think it's any surprise that that aesthetic is coming back. I I don't know, man. I really like. It never even occurred to me that things like puppets or taproot wizards are that vibe, but they are, and they're crude but smooth still in a really in a way that only happened in the 90s, really. So yeah, dude, it's like a cover band or something. Like everybody loves everybody loves the reference to the thing that they were around when they were in during development, I guess. Yeah, I don't know, man. I like that stuff. I think everything has merit that has merit, in my opinion. And merit is not one thing. Merit is like any sort of contextual intent, maybe like some sort of, there's a point, I guess. If it was thought about in advance, then I think it's probably worth discussing or worth looking at. And I think that vibe is not a mistake in a lot of cases. And I think it has a place, especially if it's trying to point toward a specific clientele of a specific age group. Then it's doing it great, because a lot of the people who have expendable income to buy these things and are the target market are in their like mid 30s, you know? So it's us. And if they're
Yes.
not making MS Paint, they're playing to the wrong crowd.
Well, and it's one of the many forms of digital. I think, obviously pixel art, digital art, and now more recently, generative art. But I do have questions later, more geared towards a discussion of the different preferences for you as a collector. But before we get there, I want to
Sure.
shift back to sort of Bitcoin native architecture, right? And this is a very E3 digital question, but a lot of artists treat Bitcoin simply as storage. Modal seems more protocol aware than that, with parent-child structure, on-chain exploration, trait sorting. Did the protocol itself shape the artwork?
Yeah, it did. Um, it wouldn't. I don't actually know if this is probably possible. Anything's possible with the smart contract, but so few things are possible with Bitcoin that I think highlighting and exploring those things is really exciting. And one of those things that I think is fun to explore is the concept of parent-child and, well, not just parent-child, but any inscription relationship being used as a sort of data tree. So you can like reinscribe onto something, and you could consider that a move on the z-axis backwards, and you could make a sibling from a parent, and you can consider that one move on the x-axis, like +1. Or you could make a child and consider it a -1 on the y-axis. So you can kind of like navigate space by making these inscription relationships, and you can not just make shapes in that space, but you can make it navigatable in a way without having to bother with metadata and indexing on like a marketplace or something, to the point where, I mean, it's laborious. So let me tell you what I did with Modal, I guess. The identity series, for example, each identity, they're the PFP ones, there's 64 of them. Each
Yes.
identity is parented by the identity parent. So like the main, if you click on the identity parent, all of the identities show up, right? That's pretty common. That's a normal use of parent-child. They're also parented by their character archetype, of which there are, I think, 8 of them. So if you click on one of these identities and you click on its parent archetype or whatever, you will be shown all of the archetypes that are that archetype. You'll be shown a subset of the identities that is filtered by that trait, essentially. And the other thing that it is parented by is whatever gradient it pulls its palette from. So each piece that's not a gradient, if you click on that piece and say ordinals.com or some explorer, you can view its parenthood and find out where it got its palette from and what archetype group it falls into. And you can click either of those things and go to them. And then in some cases, view the tree beneath that. And the gradients are quite similar. If the gradient was informed by, let's say, white, purple, red, and yellow, it will have parents that are white, purple, red, and yellow. And if you click on the red parent, you see all the gradients that are influenced by red. If you click on the purple parent, it sorts them and you see all of the gradients that are influenced by purple. I've never seen anyone do this before, and I actually if I could go back, I would add metadata, but I was really staunchly, I was like digging my heels in about it because I didn't want people to look at the metadata and be like, that's enough. I got the information I need. And because the point of this was to make things sortable and related by parent-child relationships. And I think in order to highlight that, I needed to remove the rest of the data or the rest of the features that would have stopped people from further looking at it. So I don't know if that worked in the end, but it's what standardization is the killer of joy. And as much as I think it would have made it easier, I left it off, so it's off now. The parent-child stuff is highlighted there.
You intentionally constrained yourself. You limited the palettes, the structure rules, the file sizes, even resisting your own aesthetic instincts. Why impose these kind of constraints?
I feel as though we find out new things about ourselves when we do the uncomfortable. And I think my whole life has been like this. Or like swim, you don't want to go to swim practice and swim for 3 hours and throw up after every practice, but you find out new things about yourself when you do that for a year straight. You don't want to practice piano for an hour a day, but what happens after 10 years of doing that? Like, who are you? How does that change you fundamentally? It's really easy to open a computer and have no limitations right now. It's really difficult to fake a bunch of limitations and then mandatorily work within those. Or maybe it's not difficult. It's just something I find more worth exploring from my standpoint. Because there aren't restrictions really almost anywhere with anything. The only restriction is like you can't teleport. Even then you kind of can because you can get on an airplane and go wherever you want. So we're in a world that is so bountiful and so available. And I think it's really difficult to grow as a person when you don't face any constrictions. So I'm making some up. I mean, there are other constrictions in my life, clearly, that I'm not just like a person who has unlimited money and I don't even speak the language of where I live. Like, it's really difficult for me to do stuff here because I'm kind of an outsider. That's another struggle that I didn't plan for amongst the other constrictions that I've imposed upon myself. But yeah, man, the short answer is I think you find cool stuff when you impose those kinds of constrictions that you wouldn't have found otherwise. I do anyway.
I want to shift now from modals in your artistic endeavors to more discussion of your collecting and taste and preference. One thing that the way you and I came to, I think, or at least I came to know you, was through your documenting of your Ordinals collection. And I believe you are over 130 days. I think today might be 131 days of
It's up there,
posting
yeah. It
one
is.
one work at a time. Why do you do that?
It was multi. Everything has a lot of reasons, I guess. There wasn't enough of that on the timeline. There still isn't enough of that on the timeline as far as I'm concerned. I don't expect every artist. In fact, I would love if every artist would not make it an identity of theirs to just show their own work. I think it is on everyone who knows about it or likes it to share it sometimes, and just like, it's not a responsibility anybody carries, but if I really like this stuff, why would I buy it and just sit around and barely look at it? I barely get to look at it because we're buying work that ends up in a wallet somewhere. It's not like we have it framed for the most part. So like this is an exercise in me revisiting these pieces and experiencing them from years later with a new mindset or within new context. Um, and I find that social media makes people into savage monsters in a lot of ways. And I'm trying to combat that. I can't stop them from being savage monsters to one another. The only thing I can control is what I do. So I mute things that are engagement farming. I block things that are dangerous. And I produce things that I think are in some way interesting or enlightening, or, conversation starters, or even just paying homage to people who did stuff that I respect for no other reason than that. So it's my way of contributing positively to a space that I feel has like a resting point, or like a really negative resting point. And I think there's value to that. Don't get me wrong. I think that humans have evolved to pay attention to bad news, because if we pay attention to bad news, we can avoid it and live and procreate. Like 100,000 years ago, let's say it's me and you and 10 other people walking through the woods, and we see like a dead person, right? We're like, let's say you don't care. You're like, it's a dead guy. Why do we care about that? And you go on, and I stop and look, and I'm like, what happened to this guy? Like, how can we avoid that? Maybe you don't survive because you didn't listen to the dead guy, and I do, right? And then I pass my genes on. And then for hundreds of thousands more years, or decades, tens of thousands of more years, more people continue to have sex who paid attention to bad news, because those are the people who survive, right? I think everything we are as humans, and all of our urges, and the way that the internet has kind of like hijacked it all, used to be really useful. But now it's just regurgitative, and we're like, it's just like we know where the buttons are now. We're just like pushing them. It's devoid of any meaning or messaging. It's really easy to fall into that trap. So I'm trying actively not to do that, to just generate new things that I think are not going to trigger people's like caveman buttons.
What has this process in this process? What have you learned about your own taste? Are there any
It's another
recurring
really good
themes,
question.
artists, surprises, or any changes over time?
Yeah, that I guess if I had to categorize the things I like, because they're sort of mutually exclusive, although there's a little bit of overlap. PFPs I find really in as a compelling manner of partaking in digital identity. I think it's uh, worth exploring. It's not just like it's another picture of a monkey for $400,000 and then you write it off and that's it. There's a reason all that happens, and it happens in smaller groups and bigger groups and in every corner of the internet, where people take on these pseudonyms, as you said, because your face doesn't carry any weight. Not your face. Our human faces don't carry much weight on the internet unless we make them do that, like if we're a famous person. But most people aren't famous people. So they get to assign themselves to a group that has what is agreed upon to be some sort of an ideology. And not only can they lean into that and use it as power for themselves in new social situations on the internet, obviously, but they can also contribute to how people perceive that thing. So, like, let's say puppets, for example, or maybe something a little bit more wide-reaching, CryptoPunks. Over the course of time, those have taken on the identity, like the group has taken on the identity of everyone who's ever worn one and said something publicly. So when you wear one, you kind of take on that you share a similar ideology with whatever's been developed over time, and you get to contribute to it and add new flavors to whatever, inside scoop, whatever meme pile exists in what people think of when they think of CryptoPunks. So I think PFPs are really interesting, and I think there's a lot of really powerful PFPs. Like if you're apathetic, if you think the world's going to hell and there's nothing anyone can do about it, so let's smoke weed and masturbate, you probably have a puppet. The Bitcoin puppets are for you, because the whole thing is just about dick jokes and apathy. And that's cool, because that's one way of dealing with a very strange world that we live in. If you have an OMB, it's probably, as a PFP anyway, you're probably thinking it's things are not the way they should be, and I'm going to change it, and this is how we do it. It's more of an activated approach to like trying to take whatever control you have over changing things into something that you think they are. And every PFP has some sort of like definition. Every PFP, anyway, that gains a social recognition or says enough to do so, seems to carry some weight, and you know things about people when they put them on. I think that's what's really interesting about PFPs. The other one I saved for a second is a much shorter road. I love abstract art. I don't necessarily like art that is of stuff. I don't want to see more apples. I don't want to see more people. I've had enough. I've seen people for years. I've eaten tons of apples. I don't really need a new perspective on apples and people as much as I need. And maybe this is just a product of brain damage. As much as I need to see textures, colors, geographic, top whatever, like three-dimensional stuff, things that pop out, varieties of materials potentially. There's just a million things that can, no, not a million, unlimited things can be said using abstract art, and they can be said differently, intentionally or unintentionally, and they're perceived differently by everybody. I find it like a bottomless well of statement, I guess. So PFPs I find interesting culturally, abstract art personally. Whenever I go to a museum, I stop at each of the abstract pieces much more than I do of like geopolitical commentary or portraiture or stuff like that, unless there's context that makes it particularly interesting.
This is a great segue. You mentioned that you tend to prefer individual works, generative works. That to me, we talked about this, and you just mentioned it now. You mentioned individual works, generative works, and abstraction, and that you're less drawn to edition-heavy ecosystem. What makes a work collectible to you?
That's another great point. I think that I have an irrational hatred of editions. I know that editions are kind of like the PFP of the abstract art world, or the PFP of the art world. Like it doesn't really matter who owns what. Like you're partaking in something. When you buy an edition from an artist, though, it's because you can't afford or get your hands on the original, and you want to hang it in your house, right? That's what I've always experienced as like editions or prints or whatever. It's a more affordable, more populous version of something that's unobtainable. Like you can't buy the Mona Lisa, so you buy a print of it and you hang it on your wall. That way you get to look at it, decorate your house, think about it, whatever. When we do this digitally, though, all of it is already viewable by anyone from anywhere. So why? So it just has to be about like building a community kind of. And I think my least favorite part about this space is not to say the community is like not a cool part of it, but like, how do I say this without sounding like a dick? I just don't see the value in owning one of 100 things that are identical and didn't need to be copied because they're all equally viewable by everyone. There's something that's it's like a logical issue I have with it. It's not a cultural issue. I'm not mad at artists. I'm not mad at collectors. I just can't bring myself to do it because it doesn't need to be done. Maybe it's something I got to get over.
Well, no, I think that it's like my last conversation with Hofka. He said, collecting in itself is its own. It's about the individual collector, right? And so I don't think that it can be wrong if that's your feeling.
If people are doing it and enjoying it, it's correct. I completely agree with that. Was the question I just tried to answer, was that what does it mean to collect, or what is collecting to me?
No.
That?
No, I was saying that's what collected. That was your preference, So I don't know. Yeah. That was not the question, though. The question was what makes a work collectible to you, and you did answer that.
Got it. Okay, cool.
We've gone. Do you still have time? Because I have not made it through my questions. I still got about 3 or 4. Good. Okay.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, cool.
I want to transition to talking about Bitcoin art as an infrastructure. You've said that the market may not be ready for art-specific platforms. What's broken today in digital art infrastructure?
when I said that the market may not be ready for specific art platforms, what was that? What context was that in?
This was something that me and you talked about in the DMs. We were talking about. I don't want to say specifically what we were talking about.
Okay. I was going to give something away.
Yeah,
Maybe I
well, it's
should
not
just
that it's
go
going
to
to give
the.
something away. I don't know how to describe the conversation without
Got
uh,
it.
offending anyone.
Oh,
But
can you reframe the question a little bit just so that I have
yeah,
whatever necessary context that is?
let me think of it this way. What are some of the issues in the digital art infrastructure? Is it discovery? Is it liquidity? Is it incentives? Is it audience fragmentation? Um, does that
Oh,
does that help?
yes. Okay. I actually checked out the context. So yeah, I know what you're talking about. Um, it's a really complicated question that I don't think anyone really has the answer to. We love to find scapegoats and attribute the failure of something we wanted to succeed in the way that we wanted it to succeed to something that is potentially completely unrelated. We just love to do that. We do it with everything too. We're like, Elon Musk is ruining the world and Tesla is the worst car, and we're like, we love to like scapegoat stuff and get the pitchforks out. Um, I would love a world where an art specific platform, well, I think that since this parlays directly from the conversation we were just having, about the context really not being far enough away for people to understand what digital art is or where it lives or why it lives there. If that's the case, if traditional art in, generally speaking, humans don't really understand where digital art sits or why they'd want it if it's in their phone, or how it's digital if it's manifested on paper or plastic or something like that, like it used to be in the 90s. um, all those are questions and they don't really have answers, and I don't know a lot of people who are active enough participants in the art world to care. So I think most of who ends up on the internet in the crypto world are people who are like short-term speculators, and art specific platforms do really well during periods of liquidity when everybody like just got some big DeFi airdrop that they all have more money than they've ever seen before, and they're willing to spend because they know they can sell it and buy something else if they want to. They can move around. In times like this where no one's really willing to be risk on because they know that if they spend the money, they're not getting it back. They have the picture now. They're stuck with the picture. Um, when they felt like they had an exit from the picture and they could get their money back or more, it was easy to spend. It's
Mm,
not easy to spend because during times of low liquidity, because I don't think anyone, not anyone, I don't think most people actually like art or connect to art. I think they connect to money.
mm,
I think we're in the middle of, not the middle, probably the end of like a hyper consumerist portion of the 250-year cycle that always includes some kind of like industrialization and commercialization, and then people are just like, everybody I know talks about money constant. It's the only thing they talk about. It's the only thing that motivates them to do anything. A lot of the artists I know only talk about money. And the people who are consuming the art or used to be buying the ordinals also only talk about money and they've sold all their ordinals because they want the money instead. Because when they wake up, they go, "Do I have enough money? Is there enough money?" It's actually, no, they don't ask that question. They don't ask, "Is there enough money?" They say, do I have what I need today and how do I get more?" And then that is how their life is directed. And art specific digital art platforms don't play a part in that narrative. So most people aren't interested in that because most people only care about the aggregation of wealth or the accumulation of wealth.
there's still a perception by some in digital art circles that Bitcoin isn't yet culturally legitimate art medium. Do you care whether the broader crypto world validates Bitcoin art?
No, I couldn't care less about that. I also don't care. I don't do anything and then ask people if they like that I did it, because like it's not important if people like that I did something today. It's important that I had a reason to do it, I think. And I'm not like some kind of a sociopath who doesn't care about other people's feelings or whatever. I just think there are times when other people's feelings do matter and I do take them into account. Like when I'm having dinner with my girlfriend, I want her to like have enough water, or like, is her food over salted? Like I deeply care about that stuff because nothing is fun if nobody's having fun doing it, right? But if I make this, say the modal series, And then I show it to everybody. And I'm like, do you approve? Did I do a good job? Like, that's not art. Art doesn't say, did I do a good job? And art doesn't stop being made when people stop buying it. Art isn't like an obsessive necessity that has to come out of you. And if it's not that, then it's marketing and design. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we end up with more marketing and design because that's more, you know, palatable in a lot of ways. So yeah, I don't really care what people who don't care about art think about what I'm making, if that makes sense.
It does.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. I've
Uh,
never had to formulate that sentence before, so I was kind of like feeling my way around it.
we have gone longer than I anticipated, and I thank you tremendously for your time and willingness to come onto E3 Digital and have early support. This has been a very interesting conversation for me, and I believe it will be for the audience as well. Uh, Two last questions, and I'll kind of wrap them into one. And one is about Bitcoin as the medium, and one is about sort of the future of culture and kind of big picture questions, if you will. But what is Bitcoin actually becoming as an artistic medium? And if we're early, which I believe we are, what does Bitcoin native culture look like in 5, 10, 20 years?
Oof. If you had asked me 4 years ago if art would be on Bitcoin, I would have said no. So I don't have any idea what it'll look like in the future. The only thing I can imagine is it'll probably end up looking a lot like what Ethereum and Solana and Tezos look like, developed hyper niche communities of a very specific series of kinds of art, I guess. I think if you look at what's going on Ethereum, there's a few different flavors of thing that kind of like either they happen and then they stop happening, or they're like longer reaching, wider reaching, more artists do them styles, let's say, that they're like, it sort of has co-opted as its own. I don't think Bitcoin has really of its own style yet, or the Bitcoin community hasn't made much of its own style yet. But things have been memed to death on Bitcoin. And I think that like the puppets were a unique example of that. Taproot wizards are like Bitcoin culture stuff. And there are a lot of things that happen on Bitcoin because they're jokes about Bitcoin. I don't know how that's going to tie into whatever the tech side of it will be, because if anything is a huge hurdle, I guess, in a lot of people's eyes, it's the tech specifically. People make fun of Bitcoin for being grandma, being extremely slow and not able to do anything because it's not a compute layer, it's a storage layer. So it's not like it's not Ethereum, it's not a smart contract. It's Ethereum and Tezos and Solana were purpose built to be these like game playing machines, and Bitcoin was not. And the fact that Bitcoin is the only one that you can't just turn off or like freeze protocols on, like nothing can be stopped. That's really important. I don't know how that's going to impact what's produced and how it's traded or viewed, but the fact that the art doesn't go anywhere because it's on 10,000 full nodes or whatever, nobody has to like pin it, nobody has to dick around with that stuff. And I know IPFS is a really wonderful solution to storage, file storage problems. I just find Bitcoin might be the only chain. It is the only chain that cannot be stopped. You can't just like blacklist an address and decide, no, nobody can send Bitcoin to or from this. It's like it's out of the hands of every government and every corporation. Nobody can do anything to it. That will influence, if it hasn't already, Bitcoin culture a lot, I think. And the storage thing, I think it's an interesting concept that the token that represents the art and the art are both on the same database mandatorily on Bitcoin. Nowhere else is that really the case. Most things that are on chain aren't really fully on chain. They can be rendered only from on chain stuff on other chains. And that's because the other chains are lighter and faster. They're not supposed to carry data like that. It's like you have to like hack it to get a pixel art collection onto it, or to get it to render directly from data that's only on the blockchain with no external dependencies, because they're not made for that. So they're made for tokenizing things that live elsewhere. In some cases, like say real world assets, titles to homes or deeds to, I don't know, property or something like that. And in a lot of cases, it's NFTs, and those NFTs live on like Arweave or IPFS or whatever. The fact that those two things are separate from one another, and if like IPFS, not if everybody depins something, it goes away, but the Ethereum represented token is still tradable. That's a weird series of dependencies to me that I think I'm just scarred from like trading or collecting Solana art and having it all 404 on me because I wasn't an active participant in pinning all of it. I mean, I don't want to be. I don't want to have to actively decide to pin stuff. I can just run a Bitcoin full node and it stores all of mine and everybody else's stuff as long as we run them. You know, it's not, I don't have to like decide what to pin a new thing when a new thing comes out, or pin only the stuff in my wallet, depin it when I sell it. Like I just don't, it's a lot of variables that just aren't really attractive to me and that I've been burned by before. So I think a lot of people's interest in ordinals initially was just a trauma response to losing stuff to like 404 images on Solana and Ethereum. So everybody in the ordinals ecosystem is just like mad about that. And now everybody who's like participating on Tezos, Solana, and Ethereum is like, why are you guys so mad at us? Because everybody who's having this trauma response in the ordinals eco is like, it's your fault because you keep doing it to me. But when in reality, neither party really had anything to do with any of it. It's just like, you know, shit goes wrong sometimes. So I don't know, maybe the permanence and the fact that Bitcoin just can't be stopped will have something to do with. Oh man, can I change my answer? I'll be fast about this one. Really quick. Is it okay if I change my answer?
Yes,
I can do
by all
this one fast.
means.
Um, the this is my favorite part. When you store everything mandatorily, like on a Bitcoin node, like anything that's inscribed, it just goes onto every Bitcoin node that's a full node, right? You don't get to curate what history says because all of the data is available. Anywhere else that's opt-in pinning stuff, you're choosing culturally what's important at the time. And as we've just discussed, no one at the time knows what's going to be important in 500 years. So we might need all of it in order to have a clear view of what the future is without just handing it over to whoever had the most money to write the most Penguin published books and put them into schools. It is an unterminable, is that a word? It's an unmodifiable ledger where context can be misconstrued, of course, but the data that was put there is there. Whether that data is true or false, who knows? Like that's a whole different can of worms. I just think it's kind of romantic that even the stupid stuff that most people would depin from anything else because it's a waste of storage is stuck on Bitcoin. And now we get to look back at the original inscriptions of all the people who like, you know, everywhere we go, we put lizards and boobs and drugs up first. Like that's cave walls, that's pyramids, it's Ethereum, it's Bitcoin, it's everywhere. And we have a strict record of that that doesn't rely on anybody's upkeep in the first 10,000 inscriptions. I think that's really beautiful. So maybe Bitcoin culture will be more influenced, or Bitcoin art culture will be more influenced by the fact that we have to carry everything with us. We can't choose to shed any of it.
I think that is the most powerful way we can end this interview, Donny. At It's Donny on Twitter.
It's Donny okay.
It's Donny okay. Thank you.
That's all that was available. Yeah.
I will have all the links to modals, your X account, down below for people can find you. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for your time. And if people have made it this far, ask that they like and subscribe and all that stuff, and reach out to Donny because he's one of the most thoughtful and deep thinkers in ordinals, and he's been very kind and willing to respond to me, and I'm sure he will be to others as well. So thank you, Donny.
Very much so. Anybody who wants to talk about cool stuff, call me up. Thank you. Appreciate
Nice
it.
meeting you.